What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we get into the deeper meaning of your favorite directors' movies. And it's the time you guys have all been waiting for. It is the second part of our Christopher Nolan, part 1 and part 2 of our Christopher Nolan. This time we're doing everything that's not the Dark Knight Trilogy. So that is a lot of movies. So we're going to have to get through a lot, guys. But as I say in my diary every night, it's Nolan today, Nolan tomorrow, Nolan forever. So
and Nolan we trust.
And Nolan we trust. Hashtag I believe in Christopher Nolan. Kind of like I believe in Harvey Dent. I have that button. We are fans of Nolan. We have a lot of thoughts on Nolan. Nolan is one of the most innovative directors working in Hollywood today. He always tries to keep things interesting and different. And he's always moving the needle forward when it comes to film. I am a very passionate Nolanite, and so is RB3 in some sense as well.
Some sense.
Yeah, in some sense. You know, in some sense, man.
He definitely has a lot of flaws as a filmmaker.
Hey. Ain't nobody mentioned no flaws about Christopher Nolan, bro. Christopher Nolan ain't got no flaws, bro. Christopher Nolan died for us, bro. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, shoot. Wasn't that Jesus meme that we saw before? Yeah.
But that's Zack Snyder, though, right?
Oh, that was Snyder? Okay,
yeah, that was Snyder. Yeah. Nolan was on the side, like, blessing him. Like, giving him the blessing. Yeah, because Zack Snyder is a different level, man. He's like, he's off in a different planet. Yeah. He's saving every other planet. But anyways, guys, we're going to get into Christopher Nolan today. But before we do that, we want to read your comments. Once again, guys, make sure you leave us a comment every week. It's the best way to connect with us. It's the best way to tell us what you're thinking about the episode, what you're thinking about the podcast in general, what you think of us, what you think of what you do in the future. So make sure you guys leave us a comment so we can read them, because we're going to read some comments right now about last week's episode where we talked about the Dark Knight Trilogy, starting with Mr. David Aguirre, who says, RB3 has a fierce gaze. It's true, man. Oh, yeah. I saw it. I saw it. David saw it.
Yeah.
David saw it.
Aren't seeing it.
You were pissed at me, bro, last week talking about Dark Knight.
Was I?
Yeah, you were pissed.
Since when?
You were super mad, bro. I was saying that, poor people should be locked up, bro. And you were mad at me, bro, for saying something that's so normal. No,
it's funny. Like I get that. Like sometimes, like people say I just look like kind of mad. Yeah. I don't know. Just like I have what's that, like resting bitch face? Like,
yeah.
I just have resting hood face, people.
Yeah.
I'm from Compton. This is how we just sit around.
To be fair, I do have like a scowl too when I look at people, but that's because I'm just very like, that's my thinking face, and it takes a lot out of me to think, so I'm just thinking really hard all the time.
Yeah.
But that's something that David noticed of you, RB3. I was always scowling at people, man.
I was laughing when we were talking about A Wrinkle in Time, and you were just like, or when you were like Ava DuVernay's directing, and you were just like, oh, you just look like I probably did do that, only because like, I don't know, that news is so like weird and out of pocket to me. But I think we're gonna have like a lot of interesting opinions and like conversations in this one in particular.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
I'm hoping the glazes don't get too fierce this time around.
We'll see. Tony Wagner says Ace and RB3 neither own Siskel and Ebert show on television.
Oh yeah,
yeah, man. Ebert, sorry, I mispronounced it. But yeah, Roger Ebert and Siskel had a TV show.
Oh yeah,
back in the day.
I used to watch reruns of that.
But that stuff was like, if you want your like, that was like the Rotten Tomatoes of that era. Mm-hmm. Like people would go there to see their opinions.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down. And they would see what they thought of the movie, and they were just like expert pro opinions. And we're that new expert pro opinion, bro.
Yeah, let's do it. Hopefully we don't hate each other like Siskel.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, even though you got that fierce gaze on me, bro. Come on now. Oh, man. Movie A says, I don't think Nolan is trying to say something specifically. I think the Dark Knight Trilogy does a great job on presenting themes and not come with a specific answer. That's kind of what I said, but you disagree with me? You think Nolan is a hardcore...
Yeah. I take films very literally.
Yeah.
And try and read into the text as much as possible, which is kind of the point of this podcast, I guess. So I definitely think... I mean, I know a lot of people were a little bit befuddled by my more... thoughts on how the Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises represent some level of conservatism, at least in the ideological standpoint.
I agree with that. I think it does at some point. Yeah.
I definitely and rewatching the films, the other Nolan films and his trilogy, I definitely see Batman Begins following more into some of the other tropes of his earlier work, rather than the overall conventionality of the rest of the trilogy. I think, you know, when we kind of mentioned it on our podcast last week, Batman Begins more of like a journey of self-discovery. I think that's something that is more connected to the other films in his filmography, kind of like the warring duality and duplicity that comes in, you know, the Batman versus Bruce Wayne figure. And I think that's something that factors into a lot of his other films and story beats as well in his earlier filmography. So it probably doesn't fit as much politically as I think the other two films in that trilogy.
For sure. Ryan Martinson says, podcast listener here. You do have some of us. This is my first time commenting on the YouTube video. This was another great show, guys. One of the best duos around. One thing, though. I now prefer RB3 to Ace.
Whoa.
You used to be equal to me before, after making the blasphemous statement that the Dark Knight Trilogy is better than Lord of the Rings Trilogy. Come on, man. You know RB3 is 100% right, even though his hate towards Blade Runner 2049 is ridiculous. You got to pick a side, Ryan. Which one, bro? He said he hates me now, so... but he also loves Blade Runner 2049, so that means you hate Ryan.
Yeah. I don't hate Ryan. I hate your opinion, though, Ryan. That's all I hate. No, I'm kidding. I love you, Ryan. Love your opinion.
See, man, now you got people picking sides now, man.
I know.
I stand by it. I really do stand by it. I do. I mean, it has been a while since I've seen The Lord of the Rings, but I do feel that the themes that The Dark Knight brings up on a societal and political scale is better done. Plus, the Joker is a better villain than anything that the Lord of the Rings trilogy brings us. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think it's definitely like, if you're more into like realism, probably The Dark Knight is what you're looking for. More into like, you know, fantasy kind of, you know, I guess like spectacle shit. You know?
Yeah, it's more spectacle than anything. And I know they have themes of like different people working together and all that. I get it. But I feel like The Dark Knight has more story, less spectacle. And if anything, has a cool combination of both. Whereas the Lord of the Rings trilogy at some point becomes mainly spectacle and Frodo just going nuts.
Yeah, I agree with that. But Gollum, though. Gollum's a great villain.
Yeah, for sure. I still feel like Joker's next level, but... Team Bone Storm says, as a native Chicagoan, you guys had me screaming at my phone. Batman Begins and Dark Knight were shot mostly in Chicago. Rise was shot in Pittsburgh. Gotta stand up for my city. Yeah, I mentioned that. I know I corrected myself very briefly. That's my mistake. Because I know that Dark Knight Rises was shot in Pittsburgh, but I mentioned Chicago for Batman Begins because I remember it was shot in Chicago, but I just forget what location, what movie, what city kind of thing. But yeah, my bad. I know it was Chicago. That's
yeah. But I'm sure there's some parts that are shot in New York too.
I don't think so. I think it was Chicago, Pittsburgh, and like you said, that scene in L.A.
Yeah. There's definitely L.A. and New York in The Dark Knight Rises though. Like the Wall Street stuff is definitely like New York. Like when they invaded the
that scene. Yeah. Are you sure that's not Pittsburgh?
No, that's 100% New York.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I've never been to New York. I've never been to New York.
But you're 100% though.
I'm 100% sure.
As a person who's never been to New York, I'm 100% that's New York.
As a New Yorker who's never been to New York, I'm telling you it's New York.
As a man who's seen a lot of movies that are set in New York.
Yeah. Pittsburgh, though. Pittsburgh's a beautiful city, man.
It is, man.
Yeah, it's Makuga's home.
Makuga's home. Some of my best friends from work are from Pittsburgh, and they don't shut up about it. Everyone from Pittsburgh doesn't shut up about Pittsburgh.
They love Pittsburgh, man. Hey, I've been to Pittsburgh once, man. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
It definitely deserves the acclaim. The yellow bridge, the yellow, black and yellow bridge, you know?
Yeah.
Nice stuff there.
Hey, man. Robert Glasgow says, my favorite trilogy. I have to do push-ups every time I watch any of the three. The score and the performances are unforgettable as well. Yeah, man. I mean, sometimes you just gotta do some push-ups before you watch a movie, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, if Batman's doing it, then you gotta do it.
Yeah. When Bruce Wayne's getting out of Lazarus Pit and doing those push-ups, man.
Dude,
that inspired me to.
It really does.
To take a couple of rounds. You know what I mean?
Oh man, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things where every time you see like superhero movies and stuff like that, they never actually work out, but you see Batman work out, and you're like, all right, he actually works out. Whereas like Captain America and Thor like never do any kind of work. They're just naturally ripped, like godlike people. Whereas Bruce Wayne has to work out, and you're like, dang man. That and Creed always makes me like,
oh yeah,
it makes me feel bad,
and
then it makes me want to work out.
Yeah,
like,
all the Rocky movies and Creed. Yeah.
Oh dude, every time I'm like, man, I gotta get back into it.
Yeah.
Like it's next level when you watch Creed, because I feel like you're right. Rocky movies too, but for some reason Creed is like that new workout movie. For me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely more modern. It got the modern music on it. Feels like a more, something more relatable and realistic to today's time. It's not not the cheesy like da da da, which is still dope. Like
it's still cool.
Yeah, I was watching Rocky in another class in a film class earlier in the semester, and all the tropes of that, the whole training thing is still kind of cheesy, but you still get like the chills in your bones when it's actually happening, because it's built up to that point. I think every great training sequence is built up by the movie before it. And I think The Dark Knight Rises does that pretty great. And I think Rocky and Creed do that pretty great. There are a lot of good training montages out there.
Yeah, for sure. I still love the scene where he's running in the street.
Oh,
and he's got the ATVs behind him.
Yeah.
And then the song starts playing, Lord knows, Meek Mill.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that kills me.
Yeah, free Meek Mill, man.
As soon as he's like starting to sprint, and then it slows down. I'm like, I want to run. All right, guys, let's get into it. This week, we're talking about Christopher Nolan. As I said before, we're talking about everything that is not the Dark Knight Trilogy, meaning all of his other films.
It's like 7 others, right?
Yeah, 7 others. He's got 10 films in total. This guy just got nominated for Best Director. He just won a few Oscars for sound editing and sound mixing for Dunkirk. Some people say he deserved more. Probably RB3 is the person who said that. Oh, yeah. But yeah, this guy is obviously built up a reputation for himself for being a very, like I said before, innovative director. Very always wanting to try something different and wanting to try something new as far as genres and as far as style goes. But we're gonna probably do this in chronological order just because I feel like that's the most relevant thing to do. Starting with his first film that RB3 just rewatched, which is Following.
Yeah.
Now, full disclosure, guys, I haven't rewatched all his films. I've seen all his films, but as far as like a nice, relaxing rewatch, I did not. However, a nice, relaxing listen of a RB3 lesson is what I need right now in my life. And RB3 just rewatched this one. So I want to hear your thoughts first. First of all, on your overall impression when you first saw the movie, as far as like what you got out of it, and then what you think of it like looking back at it now after the rewatch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely, watching this movie at a much younger age, it's all black and white. It's following this writer by the name of Billy. He is a dude who is looking for inspiration for his novel, so he starts following people around and stalking them to try and get into the lives of them and write characters and personalities based on that. He follows around this dude named Cobb, not the Cobb from Inception.
Even though he kept the same name.
Yeah, but a different Cobb. But he's also a thief.
Yeah.
Who
Christopher Nolan just like, I did a thief in the fall, and I'll just call him Cobb.
Yeah.
That's a cool thief name.
Yeah. Perfect thief name. They kind of, interesting enough, they kind of do a similar type of thing where the Cobb in this movie goes into people's houses and looks at their personal belongings and interprets like meanings and like how that life is spent and what they do. And it's a really interesting kind of philosophical journey because this dude Billy, he tags along with Cobb to like do these like weird burglaries and introspective looks into people's lives, and kind of influences him as a writer. Little does Billy know that Cobb is setting him up the entire time with this blonde mistress. I unfortunately forgot her name, but they go on like this this thing together. It's
called the Blonde.
The Blonde. That's really what. Yeah. Nice, Nolan. It's very reminiscent of like those old school noirs.
It's super noir.
Yeah,
it's super like noir. Yeah. Like you could tell Nolan is like, he just saw a noir movie and he's like, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, something like The Thin Man or anything by like Anthony Mack or whatever. A lot of really like straight up just cutthroat noir isms in this, but it's still very philosophical, still very literature driven. And I think this opens up kind of a broader conversation about Nolan's work, where it comes to the trust and the personality that we put behind objects and what objects represent to the person, to the people that own them. And I think that's a theme that follows him throughout all of his films, frankly, and that's something that's really prominent here. And going back to Dark Knight Trilogy, the whole idea of the object being the symbol in that film, the symbol of the Batman, and how that represents the culture of Gotham and the culture throughout the entire world. This movie is more about symbols representing people in their personal lives and how influence. Like there's that whole scene like kind of early on in the film where Billy and Cobb are inside this person's house, and they're just looking through this old dusty box of photos that this family like seemingly left behind, or this couple seemingly left behind. They're kind of dissecting what that means, and then then Cobb opens up the box of photos and just kind of looks and just scatters it all around. Billy asks like, well, what are you doing? Why'd you do that? And he says like, well, without us doing that, they would have not remembered why they got married in the first place, like they would, or not married, but why they're together. Like, the losing something or messing something up is a reminder. It's interrupting their life to kind of take a look and reflect back and how those photos mean something to them. And then right after that scene's immediately over, we see the person whose house they're burglarizing come in, the woman of that household, but with another man. And it's like she was cheating on that guy the entire time. So what the Cobb dude is saying does kind of have merit and does have some sort of sense and semblance to like the actual personalities that he's robbing. So it's really interesting, like introspective, like the distrust of oneself and the trust that we put into each other's objects, and the distrust that Billy puts into himself as a person as well. So he even has a whole thing where he kind of has Cobb like rob like himself to a certain extent, to see like if what that interpretation of his life is. And it's really interesting, like kind of introspective look into one's mind.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like right off the bat, Nolan's first movie is about defining who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And the way he chooses to do that in this movie is defining who you are by what you hold dear, as far as, like you said, an object, as far as some sort of material thing that you hold dear to yourself, or you think you hold dear to yourself, in order to define who you are as a person. So it's defining yourself through what you own and through what has been given to you, is essentially what Cobb is trying to say by going through these people's stuff. It's a very interesting point of view as well. It's also in a way defining who you are by what you own and what you choose to buy as well, and how you choose to dress yourself. I know a lot of this movie is also like Cobb dresses like a baller in this movie. Very nice suits and stuff. Whereas like Billy is like super schlubby and like super like
weird haircut,
like a typical writer type look, like desperate writer look, where his like crazy hair and like ugly ass shirt and hasn't showered or whatever. Whereas Cobb keeps himself very refined and keeps himself always dressed well, and that is part of his defining factor as a person. He uses that as a way to define himself. Like this is me, this is who I am. Even though I have a supposed criminal job, I keep myself and I keep my appearance top notch, and I keep it at a very high scale, even though what I'm doing might be low scale or apparently low scale. And then we see Billy attempt to almost replicate that in a sense of, like admiration of Cobb.
Right.
To
how he's able to dissect other people's lives. He wants to do that and put that into his writing, which I think is one of the things that Nolan, Christopher Nolan, he graduated from university. I'm not sure exactly what university, but he was a literature major. So he takes a lot of credence into writing and to the creative process in general. And a lot of his movies contain a lot of intertextual and extratextual references. He kind of, and interesting enough, he kind of strays away from like referencing movies themselves, but he always references other literature, other writing. And you even see that. I mean, like one of the Cobb's things is that he'll look at the books that people own and determine like what kind of interest they have and like who they are as people. What age are they? Like, did they recently graduate college and all that kind of stuff? So it's a really interesting look into how literature influences not only people as individuals, but how influences Nolan as a filmmaker, because his movies are very, often take a lot of cues from pre-existing literature and have a very like wordy kind of, overly like typed out, like a lot of very dialogue heavy kind of stuff that he goes there.
Yeah, very expositional.
Expositional. Yeah, and that's Listen, I'm gonna say this up front. That's my biggest problem with Nolan as a filmmaker.
Yeah, a lot. It's a lot of people's biggest problem.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it, but that's because I come from a different
Yeah.
world as far as entertainment and as far as media goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's something that a lot of people don't like for Nolan. But then again, you're saying it that he gets it from that kind of literature.
Yeah.
Which is much more, bigger and lots of words and lots of stuff to explain. And he just loves detailing every little thing that he wants to explain.
Yeah. Well, monologues in Nolan's films are something that are regular. And if you, I guess, if you're familiar with like, plays and theater and even like novels, a lot of those big chunky pieces of dialogue and stuff feels very natural on the page. It doesn't necessarily reflect necessarily in the cinematic stance. I definitely think what Nolan does pretty well as a filmmaker is that he's able to incorporate good actors and like letting them breathe a little life into the exposition. Particularly, I feel like, we're going back to Dark Knight a little bit, but I feel like the reason why the Dark Knight kind of works the most is because he gives all the exposition to the Joker and let the Joker handle all of that, and it comes off in a really like lively and personable way. I think in some films it works. For me, it doesn't really work in one of his later films like Memento. For me, like,
okay,
yeah, that one for me is
Prestige is also another movie that's very. It's not subtle. You can tell what he's saying.
Yeah,
he's literally throughout the entire movie, he's telling you. He's literally saying it over and over again through Hugh Jackman's character, which I'm cool with. I don't need everything to be incredibly subtle and incredibly, minuscule and small. But he's very big. Like Nolan is a very big, bold, exposition heavy kind of director, and that's kind of what he's known for.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where I got this comparison from, but it's an interesting comparison. What Nolan is kind of the combination of a Spielberg and Kubrick, right? Kubrick in the sense that his characters are very cold, collected, kind of having these like really philosophical and big ideas, but it's very Spielbergy in the way that Spielberg likes to explain everything to you in that sense. And whereas, especially when it comes to some of Nolan's like earlier work, the explanations come full out, but they're also like misleading and distracting almost to a way too, because really what a lot of characters are saying are coming from inside of themselves as well. You talk about The Prestige. The Prestige is told all through like journals and like all of these flashbacks and voiceover and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of times we realize later on in that movie that the journals are fake, and that we realize that a lot of the objects that we come to trust, and particularly in The Prestige, are things that are illusions, are tricks. And it's, again, a bigger meta-narrative commentary on how we perceive the notions of film and trickery and editing and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's very aware of his audience. He's very aware of what he's telling the audience and what he wants the audience to feel and believe, essentially. Yeah. Through his exposition and through his way of narrative, because he's very self-aware of how he's telling the story as well as what story he's telling.
Right.
Like it goes hand in hand with him. Both ways. Let's finish up on following though, because I know essentially too it's about deception, right? Because Cobb essentially, like you said, frames Billy, and essentially it kind of shows his true hand when he shows his true self, as far as his deception towards someone who didn't see that coming, essentially.
Right. And I think that's, I think that's what's part of the big central theme in this movie is who are you left to trust if you can't even trust yourself? You know what I mean? Billy's a character who doesn't have enough like security in what he's doing as an artist, as a writer. So he's relying on other people's stories to tell his own story. So then like once, but it's kind of the deception of like, how are we able to trust? He's unable to trust himself. He's unable to trust his conscious and his subconscious. So he relies on his trust in other people, and what happens when that falls back too. So it's a really interesting kind of parallel.
And it's also not knowing yourself, right? Someone who's a writer and someone who's obsessed with following other people and with learning about other people in order to write about other people might not know themselves the way that they think they do. And if you're someone who has a tendency of following people and kind of obsessing over them, you start to lose a little bit of who you are. And if you even know who you are as a person, right? Do you know who you are as a person if your entire life is based around other people?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question too, right? Someone like a Billy whose job it is to kind of learn about other people in a very discreet way. You know, what happens to someone like that who might be a little bit too trusting on other people and not rely on himself as much with a career like a writer?
Right. Do you think Nolan follows people around to try and write his scripts to
Probably,
yeah. Do you think? Yeah, I mean, you know, that's
this could be. I mean, no, like you said before, man. Nolan he's this super meta guy. He's like super self-aware of like who he's taught. He might be Billy might be a representation of himself in a way. Not obviously to the fullest extent, but to some extent, as far as him being a writer and as far as him being a storyteller and as far as him learning about different types of people and how he chooses to write stories about them. Because essentially, Nolan has written pretty much every single one of his movies except for Insomnia, I think. But he's written all of his movies. Yeah. So he's a guy who's very self-aware of what he's putting on paper and on screen. Yeah. Is essentially what he is. So.
Yeah, I mean, his brother Jonathan Nolan.
Jonathan, of course, writes.
Frequent collaborator as well.
It usually goes both hand in hand with him.
Yeah, there's some films that Nolan has done by himself too. But it's interesting, kind of looking at the relationship between those guys. Whereas Jonathan Nolan is a very big TV name now. He's written a lot of very successful shows. And he is more of a figure who, I think he was raised in America, whereas Nolan was raised in Britain. Where I'm sorry, Britain's not a place. He was raised in England, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas like Jonathan Nolan is very much more like American sensibility to his writing. He has more of his style, you know, I guess in their collaborations you could kind of see like Jonathan Nolan's hand in making more of a realistic, like Americana kind of writing style, whereas opposed to Nolan's very like almost stuffy, kind of like a higher level, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting.
More theatrical.
More theatrical,
yeah. He's very into theatrics. Let's jump into his next film, which I believe is Memento. Yeah, it is Memento. Yeah. This movie came out in 2000. Starring Guy Pearce, and obviously starring what's her name? Oh my God, I'm blanking. Trinity, Carrie-Anne Moss. Carrie-Anne Moss and Joe Pantoliano, who is also in The Matrix, right? He's Cypher in The Matrix.
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, you're right. I didn't make that connection.
So both of them are from The Matrix, so it's a Matrix reunion. I believe he plays Cypher. I might be wrong. Let me see. Yep, he plays Cypher. So starring Joe Pantoliano or Pantoliano. I always mess up his name. He's also in Daredevil too.
He's in the TV show Daredevil?
No, he's in the movie Daredevil, the Ben Affleck Daredevil. Okay. Yeah, this is when that guy was popping, bro. Like back in this era, 2000s? Early 2000s, late 90s, mid 90s. He was also in the other Wachowski's film.
Cloud Atlas?
No,
Speed Racing?
No, the first one they did. What was the first Wachowski film?
I don't think I've seen anything before
the lesbian movie. Sorry if I call it the lesbian movie. I swear I'm gonna get it right now. Hold on.
I have no idea.
It's called.
I haven't watched any Wachowski films before The Matrix.
It's not The Immortals. Is it Bound? Yeah, Bound.
Oh, Bound. The Immortals. I have heard of that.
Bound.
But Bound. Okay.
It's about these two girls.
Oh, okay. I hadn't seen that one.
It's the Wachowskis.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it, dude. I'm telling you, listen to. You're the one who got me on her, Amy Nicholson.
Oh yeah.
Listen to Amy Nicholson's episode on The Matrix.
Okay.
Because she has on, I think her name is Carmen Esposito. You know who Carmen Esposito is?
Carmen Esposito.
She's like a really famous comedian. But basically, I think I told you about this. But basically, Amy Nicholson and her have a discussion about The Matrix and how the Wachowskis are like everyone thinks it's like the super right pro-gun thing, but it's like actually like a super gay movie.
Oh, really?
Like it's super funny the way they like dissect it, because the Wachowskis are like super gay.
Yeah, well, I mean they're the siblings now.
Yeah.
Or I guess sisters.
RB3, you're offending thousands of people right now.
I was trying to dance around it. I mean, like, I was gonna say something about the lesbian thing, man. I don't want to
offend people. You already did, bro.
No.
You already did.
Hey, none offensive. I got none respect, but for the LGBTQ plus community,
Nothing but respect for my two directors.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to
Siblings.
Memento.
Yeah, two siblings.
Sorry, I got on a Joe Pantaniello rant.
We went into like a deep dive on Joe Pantaniello right
sorry,
now.
I just remembered he plays Cypher in The Matrix, and I love The Matrix. And then I remembered about the Wachowskis, and I remember he was in that lesbian movie, and it's Bound. And
guys, what we're really saying here, we're alluding to a Wachowski's meaning of episode coming up very soon.
Dude, that'd be dope. I'd be down. I haven't even considered it. I haven't even considered it.
They have they have a lot of really deep.
They do. They always think about their movies. That's
if they're not
good, they put thought into them. That's for sure.
Kyle Atlas is kind of an amazing think piece in a way too.
In a way, it is. Anyways, Memento. This is one that you said that you think is too exposition heavy.
Yeah.
This one plays with narrative a lot too, and
it does.
Nolan has this thing with narrative. He's very obsessed with, like I said before, not just what story you're telling, but how you're telling the story, and he has a very deep connection with the audience member. Nolan is very keen on putting himself in the audience and putting the audience in the forefront, and kind of playing with the storytelling method of a movie, as far as what you're revealing to the audience and what you're not revealing to the audience, and what the audience believes what a movie is going to be. Meaning, like, every time you watch a movie, you have an expectation of how a movie is going to tell you a story. You have, like, automatically, just naturally, ever since we're watching movies as we're a little kid, we grow up with expectations as far as how a story is told on screen.
Right.
And Nolan is super self-aware of that, and he plays around with that in almost all of his movies, pretty much.
Yeah, I consider it, I got some SAT words
for you.
The manipulation of temporal design.
That's made up bullshit. AKA bullshit. No, I'm playing.
No, that's exactly what it is. I mean, he's taking what we all associate with the common tropes and expectations, and like you said, of the language of cinema as we come to understand it to this point, the relationship between individual cuts and what they mean when put next to each other. He does that, but takes that to like the fullest extent, and like kind of reaches. And have you seen that meme where it's like the blue brain like expands like further and further? Yeah. It's kind of like that with him. It's like normal movies are just like the basic thought, and he sees like Terrence Malick get a little deeper, and then you see like Memento just like kind of exploding in the editor's mind. And I think that's something to say too. His frequent collaborator from an editing standpoint, Lee Smith, deserves a lot of credit for the films that he cuts together, because all his movies are very well edited. In the sense that you get a clear understanding of each story, while having this really convoluted sense to it. I think what's really interesting about Memento, and again, I think Memento is a great film as a writing piece, and I guess as an editing piece. I get a little concerned about exposition, but I think it's really interesting how you have this movie that the scenes in color are happening in real time, all in one particular forward direction. The black and white scenes are happening in reverse. So it's like the first scene in black and white is the last scene in chronological order of that story. But yet those, when cut together and interweaving, it still creates its own like 3-act structure. And like there's a lot of really brilliant writing, because if you were to take the black and white sequences and put them in chronological order and present them in that front, the movie would be completely different, and it wouldn't have the same emotional catharsis at the end, when you have that scene of Teddy, when Teddy's being shot, or when you realize the true nature of Guy Pearce's character. What's his name?
I forget his name.
Yeah,
Leonard.
How his whole thing is compromised in the fact that he is the one who actually like murders his wife, and he's already caught the rapist way before. But he's, again, it's the idea that we see in the following, the trust that we put into objects. Whereas in the following, it was just personal possessions, and here is photographs and notes and little mementos that he writes to himself. But he's not able, his mind in of itself is unreliable. It's kind of the concept that we talk about a lot in film school, the unreliable narrator, how the narrator of the story has so much, is so broken and so mentally distraught that his reading of the situation is very unsimilar and very, distraught from like actual reality. And I think that's what's really interesting. It's something that we see a lot of, like a lot of French New Wave films, with Godard films and stuff like that. And there's and it's really interesting how Nolan approaches it. I don't know if you've ever, this is a weird reference, but if you saw, I don't know if you ever heard of the Steven Soderbergh film Lemon, I think is what it's called.
I've heard of it, haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful kind of piece that kind of encompasses like what a character looks like when when a character who's narrating from the perspective of his journey, but he has absolutely no idea what's going on. Sure. It's like a puzzle piece trying to connect his story. I think Spielberg takes a lot from that, and Memento as well. So
yeah, it's like you mentioned before. I'm going to mention that as well. As far as like Leonard's character places a lot of faith in the objects that he has, meaning he relies on it as if it's physical evidence, because it's literally physical. He sees that as evidence of fact. He sees that as truth. Pictures, notes. As soon as he reads those notes, as soon as he sees those pictures, to him, that's Bible. That's like fact. That's faith. That's like, there's nothing that's unwavering to him as his character. So when he follows the notes and he follows the pictures and he follows everything that it says for him to do, he's following the correct path, because that's what he interprets as the correct path, whether or not that's the truth. But the fact that he reads the truth as something visual and as something physical is very interesting, because it ends up being not true, which is something that's kind of rare in nowadays society, because society, and American society specifically, relies so much on tangible physical objects as a way to interpret situations that happened, especially with a crime, right? Because with a crime, you go to the physical evidence of the crime. You go to everything that's tangible and everything you can touch and everything you can measure. So when Leonard's character sees that, he sees that as the truth, as his defining factor of what he believes to be true, even though it's himself manipulating himself into following this endless journey. So he has, in a way, he has purpose in life, right? That's how I interpret it, as like him giving himself continuous purpose in life. Right. That's why he does what he does, even though his purpose might be in a way evil, in a way unmoral. Right. But it's his interpretation of what purpose is, and he's given himself purpose every time he forgets. So he's like, I forgot. What do I do? Oh, I can do this. Let me go do it. And he finds that purpose, even though the purpose isn't necessarily the right thing to do, or even the right thing at all.
I think it's interesting when you mention how the faith is put so much into the physical. I think this is another meta commentary on Nolan himself as a filmmaker, who puts a lot of his work in the hands of physicality, practical effects, no CGI, films everything on cellular film, the physical medium of cinema itself. And he prefers, as his movies are projected and on film as well. So as a filmmaker, he's very tactile, and I think that is interweaving into his characters as well, and their trust in objects, because Nolan likes to feel the film. I mean, I've even heard that he still likes to have his films edited on flatbed editing. You know what I mean?
That's crazy.
So that is pretty crazy. I mean, and that's that's the kind of filmmaker that Nolan is. I think that's kind of put into his characters too, the need for the physical, and the withdrawal from the digital, and the and whatnot too.
And it's also the trust in yourself, right? Leonard's character trusts himself so much to the point that he doesn't think that he would deceive himself, even though in reality he would absolutely deceive himself in order for a purpose in life, or in order to distract himself from anything else. He believes that everyone else is lying to him except for himself.
Right.
When in reality, everyone else is telling him the truth, and he is lying to himself, and he's basically deceiving himself into believing a lie in order for him to fulfill some sort of purpose in life, or fulfill some sort of thing to do, basically, every time he forgets.
Right.
So
right.
a journey that he has to take on so he can keep going in life and have a purpose and a thing to do, a meaning. And yet he doesn't realize that the biggest deceiver and the biggest enemy of yourself isn't everybody else, but it's yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very technical film in the sense that it interweaves a lot of these convoluted storylines. There's also the first collaboration between Christopher Nolan and his DP, his frequent collaborator,
Pfister?
Willie Pfister.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
They met back, I think, during a film festival in 1999, where the following was showing, and I think Pfister has something showing as well. But yeah, this is their first collaboration, and you could definitely see that in the film. A lot of very beautiful visual, kind of tactile stuff, and I think this film kind of demonstrates Nolan as like kind of almost a reserved filmmaker to a certain extent. He doesn't go with flashy camera movements. He doesn't do like these weird zooms and fast cutting. He's very presenting it with a certain style of realism, and I think that's really interesting as well.
It's also something that Nolan does a lot is the interpretation of reality. We're obviously going to get to that a lot more in Inception, but he does it in this movie as well, as far as perceived notion of reality and perceived notion of your own reality, meaning Leonard's character perceives his reality to be a certain way, even though his perception is completely off. It's almost irrelevant what actual reality is, because his perception is what dictates his life decisions. Meaning, what he believes is leading him in a certain direction, whether what he believes is true or not, or whether what he believes is based on any evidence, because he's giving himself the evidence and basically saying, believe that. It's almost as if I'm planting clues for myself so that I can find it later, which is exactly what the movie is, right? Mm-hmm. But it's, I plant the clues, and then I find the clues, and then those clues that I planted are to give me the evidence and the facts to believe what I believe, even though it's me. And it's the circular motion of basically creating my own reality and creating my own kind of religion, in a sense, as far as giving me evidence of things to believe, when in reality it's just me feeding myself into my own lie, and it's like a circle that goes around and round. Mm-hmm. And that's basically his whole life in this movie, which is kind of depressing, but right. It's also Nolan dealing with the idea of reality and the perception of reality.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. But you have a criticism in it. You say it's too expositional.
Yeah, it's very exposition-y, man. I think
explain that a little more.
Well, I just feel like a lot of this movie can be. I mean, if for Nolan being such a dude who, like I said, very tactile, uses a lot of objects to tell a story, and a lot of times I feel like, for me as Nolan as a filmmaker, to me, I love him because he does a lot of great stuff in telling the story visually. He's a great visual filmmaker in the sense that he could show you the words almost as much as he could tell it to you. That being said, this movie does a lot of telling and does a good amount of showing, but I feel like the telling is a lot more to the forefront. Like we have a lot of voiceover, we have a lot of like long monologues and exposition and dialogue. Almost to the point it doesn't even like feel almost natural to me to a certain extent, and which is fine. But I just feel like I just feel like for the potential that this movie had to just be a straight up visual piece that we only rely solely on the visuals and letting us piece together this puzzle just as much as the Guy Pearce character is. It's just a lot. It's a lot of writing. You know what I mean? That's my only major problem.
You don't think that's some sort of way for him to pay homage to like the noir? Because this is very noir too, as far as like.
It's kind of noir, but it's more neo noir in the sense that it's more of a commentary on the noir tropes and stuff like that. But you
don't think that's him playing with that, with the exposition and the voiceover and all that?
I mean, I definitely do. But what I enjoy about noir is less the exposition, because a lot of old school 1930s 40s noirs are very exposition-y, are very heavy-handed, but I feel like, today, especially, in the modern age, we don't really have a lot of that. And I think it's good that we kind of moved on past that. But I also think it's almost to a certain extent, it's a bewilderment to this film in the sense that, like, it's more, I'm not really sure if I'm explaining it correctly, but I feel like this movie relies so much on the exposition and relies so much on the words that it kind of distracts from the overall cinematic journey that we're telling anyway. Whereas noir films are kind of, the exposition is definitely there and is definitely holding the audience's hand and trying to decipher this mystery.
Sure.
There's also a lot of style, a lot of flair, a lot of deep shadows, a lot of like really interesting visuals and pieces and characters. Whereas this movie does have a lot of interesting characters, but I for something of this kind of scale, you could have. I feel like it could have been almost more efficient to have less of the lengthy words and monologues throughout this movie. I mean, I know as critics, you're not supposed to review the movie you want, but to review the movie that you have. And I think that, definitely this movie has a strong sense of the narrative in and of itself. I just personally, I don't have for me, Memento it goes a little too hard on that front. And
sure.
I feel like a lot of his movies do, though. Fair enough. And we're going to talk about Interstellar later. To me, that's my number one thing about Interstellar is, to why I don't like it. But I do like Interstellar. But
sure.
like to what really holds back from being a great film to me is that.
Is the exposition.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's jump into his next movie, which is Insomnia.
Yeah.
And as I said before, this is one of his only films that he hasn't written in some sense. Because I believe all his other films, he has some sort of hand in writing it. Mm-hmm. But this is actually a movie that he didn't write himself. The screenplay is by Hilary Seitz and Nicolas Frobenius.
Yeah, I think the Nicolas Frobenius credit is for the original film that this is based on.
That's right. You told me it's based on another Insomnia. That's right.
Yeah. There's based on, I believe, a 1999 film, the same title, but it's a Norwegian picture. Similar kind of, same plot essentially. It's a remake, so of course. But yeah, it's a really interesting story. And this movie does recapture that a lot to the same extent too. It's another movie about not trusting one's own mind. It's about starring Al Pacino, Hilary Swank, and a plethora of other like really good actors as well.
Yeah, I always forget that guy's name. Robin Williams is in this too.
Oh, Robin Williams, yeah, of course.
That's not who I was thinking of. I was thinking of this guy, Martin Donovan.
Martin Donovan.
He's in a bunch of stuff. He's in Ant-Man.
Who's he in Ant-Man?
He's the freaking.
Oh, the old dude.
He's the corrupt guy from S.H.I.E.L.D. that gets punched by.
The old dude. Yeah, Michael Douglas in the beginning.
Yeah.
By the way, Ant-Man commentary, me and the Wangers, I think will be coming out very soon.
Nice. But yeah, he's it's interesting because I've heard this before. I've heard, and this is people talking and friends talking and film people talking. Nolan is a great director. He isn't necessarily a great writer. I don't agree with that, but a lot of people believe that. This is a chance for people to cling to that. This is a movie that Nolan directed, but he didn't write. How do you feel how do you feel the finished product was done? Do you feel that this was a good example of Nolan being great director? Or do you feel like this was this isn't a Nolan movie because it's not written by him and you can tell that he doesn't have that connection to the source material?
No, I think this is very much a Nolan movie.
Okay.
I didn't even know he didn't write it until you just mentioned it just now. But it's, I think it's very distinctly Nolan in the fact of his style. Again, kind of reserved, kind of very straightforward. And I think it's, but it has an aura of mystery to it as well. I think there is a lot of, this is another example of another exposition kind of heavy film too. But it does, again, it's another Nolan thing. He kind of gives a good actor a bulk of the exposition and kind of lets that live in his own life. And in this case, it was Robin Williams' character. And it's really fascinating, this whole story of this detective coming to like this city, I can't remember exactly
Alaska.
which state. Alaska, yeah, in Alaska where the sun doesn't set. And that's a really spooky premise right there.
That's creepy as hell. Yeah. I would be scared out of my mind, dude. Because I rewatched this movie like 2 weeks ago in preparation for this podcast because I didn't know we were gonna do it in this order. Right. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot about that. That's so scary. Yeah. Because I think of like that movie 30 Days of Night based on the graphic novel. And it's like, that's scary. And that's in Alaska too. Yeah. But then the whole like, no, we don't have your sun all the time. And it's like, what? Yeah. I feel like I'm in a different planet, dude. That's scary. Yeah. So scary. But anyways, keep going.
No, it's interesting. And it's the fact that what that kind of climate will do to you mentally already.
That'll mess you up.
Yeah. I mean, just from a physiological standpoint, your body isn't, if you're not from that, you're not prepared to live in that. Especially this is a detective coming from LA. And which, by the way, this is another kind of thing that I think Nolan does too. He kind of casts the people who kind of reflect the general sense of character that he wants in his movies. He's a very big Heat fan. Michael Mann's film Heat, that stars Pacino and De Niro, based on an LA cop, an LA detective in the cat and mouse game. This movie is about the LA cop, again by Pacino, but he's put into a totally different environment and how he grows up from that too. And so it's a very telling film. And the whole idea of like this rape/murder that was committed against this girl and investigating who that is, but ultimately it's the story of Pacino's character accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, murdering his partner in the line of duty and shooting him in that really crazy really crazy haze of fog during that chase scene with the Robin Williams character. So it's a really interesting, really insightful kind of piece here that I really enjoy.
It's also too like it's all about, I mean, obviously it's about a lot of things, but it's about motive too, right? Because before that, we have reason to believe that he may have wanted to kill his partner
because he was going to rat on him. Yeah, he had that big controversy back for the LAPD, and his partner was gonna out him for it. And it's that question of like morality, like is snitching on your partner for is snitching on your partner for doing some immoral and unethical actions really the right course? Or how is that going to affect Al Pacino's character? Is that like subconsciously what he was fearing the entire time?
That's the thing, right? It's all about conscious and subconscious, right? Did he kill his partner in some sort of subconscious rage, as far as like he was aware but he wasn't aware, in a sense of like you get the notion like that could be your partner, but you're okay with him dying if he does die, and if it's the killer, it's the killer. That kind of thing, where it's like, it could be him, and if it's him, oh well. If it's not him, oh well. It's like you're kind of okay with him getting shot because it's two birds with one stone. In one sense, I could catch the killer, and that's cool. In another sense, I stopped my partner from ratting on me. Right. So either way, I win, right? But then when he starts covering it up, that's when you start to be like, wait a minute. If you're innocent, why are you covering this up, and why are you trying to, brush it under the rug and stuff? Like, a good cop wouldn't do that. But then you start to learn that maybe he's not necessarily a good cop. Yeah. Because he was gonna rat him out for stuff that he's done before. And he has this, like, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he has, like, this weird, like, hatred for IA, Internal Affairs, or Infernal Affairs, whatever it's called, where people who investigate corrupt cops and stuff. Yeah. Because he has that conversation on the phone with the guy, and he's like, oh yeah, IA is always trying to get in my business, and they think they're so cool and they're petty, and all they want to do is get rid of good cops, even though we might get our hands dirty, but whatever. That's the business. That's the way how to do it. Right. So he has already kind of like this predisposition of hatred towards them, that in a way you automatically you like Al Pacino's character and the initial character because you feel like he's a good guy and his heart's in the right place, but then you start to slowly question your likability of the character. You start to question if that character is actually a moral character in Al Pacino's character, because you'd be like, wait a minute, is he a corrupt cop? Right. Is he someone who just wants to shoot his partner and just brush things under the rug and get away with stuff? Right. Like, is he just as bad as like a villain, basically? Right.
No, absolutely. And I think that's kind of the big point that's being stated throughout this film, whether or not he as a character has the capacity to empathize with the crimes that he has committed in the past, while reconciling with the things he's doing out in Alaska, and how that's incriminating the people surrounding him. And particularly it's like he's seeing like a mirror reflection of himself, and like the positive and the good image that is like the Hilary Swank character and her police. I mean, she's newer, she's kind of pure. She doesn't have like that level of corruption that Al Pacino's character has, and he sees the good and potential that he has within her, and he's trying to instill that into himself. But he also doesn't want to corrupt her in the same sense too. So that's why in the end, when he is giving that whole thing, that really good monologue of explaining to her like the entire situation, she figures it out herself. But when he's like in his dying breath, and she's saying like nobody has to know. He's telling her like, no, don't give up your credibility on the account of me. Be your own person, and remember, stay pure, like all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a really like nice, touching piece, and particularly comparing this to like, again, another theme in the Dark Knight movies, the Bruce Wayne, the Batman character, being like the dark vigilante, the heroic figure that's kind of morally corrupted himself, versus somebody like a Harvey Dent, who's supposed to represent like the white knight, the good, the pure, and how that dichotomy kind of happens. So it's a really interesting piece in that sense.
It is. It's very much like.
I'm sorry. I keep saying interesting. By the way, I don't mean to like. I don't want to end every sentence with interesting.
It's fine. I say interesting. I said interesting like so many times.
Yeah,
today. Yeah. But for me, it's very much like there's a great show that I've talked a lot about before called Luther.
Oh yeah, with Idris Elba.
With Idris Elba. Have you seen that show?
I haven't. No.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so freaking good. But part of the premise of the show is that this character, he's like a homicide detective, and he's very much like he specializes in very unique serial killers. So he's like a serial killer specialist, this guy. He's from Idris Elba's character.
Right.
And what he does is that he gets inside the mind of a killer. And he gets inside the mind of like a psychotic serial killer. So every episode he has a new serial killer to try and like dissect and try and find. So it's like a super like intellectual, like what is this serial killer thinking? Kind of like this movie too, where as far as like he's trying to get inside the mind of like what is the literature he's reading? What kind of thing is he trying to say? What kind of markings is on the body? How cold is he? How calculating is he? And he's trying to get inside the mind of a killer. And throughout the series of the show, Luther, he slowly starts to almost kind of go nutty himself. Because of so much obsession over so many crazy people, he starts to get a little kooky himself. And that's kind of like the premise of the show, is like it takes a crazy person to find a crazy person, and how like this cop who's slowly falling off the edge of sanity and morality in a sense, because of so many times of trying to get inside the mind of a serial killer. And obviously this movie doesn't do that to the full extent as Luther does, but it does do it in a way of like, after being like following this guy, he starts to go a little nuts, no sleep, covering up for his friend's death, and at the same time dealing with like this crazy like rapist killer killing teenage girls like type character of Robin Williams.
Right.
And obviously the phone calls he has with him too. It's like it's kind of making him go a little nutty and start to question his own sanity as far as what's going on.
Right, because initially he's swearing by the idea that he killed, like it was an accident that he shot his partner. But then like the more and more he's broken, the less and less that he sleeps, the more questionable that becomes in his own mind. And again, it's another like distrust of oneself. And again, there's a lot of emphasis put on that gun too, right? Like he's trying to plant the gun on the Robin Williams character and make it seem like he shot his partner. And a lot of that different, or I'm sorry, not the Robin Williams character, but that early suspect that he has, what was the teenage boy?
Yeah, the kid,
who he's trying to pin that whole thing on too. So it's very interesting how that kind of how that reflects in both of their works, and again, I think there's really brilliant filmmaking where Al Pacino kind of goes back into the house and trying to recovers the gun before the rest of the people goes there, because that gun ultimately holds like what is objectively true, and that's ultimately how Hilary Swank's character comes to the conclusion, the resolution of the plot. So
yeah, something else I noticed about this movie too is how it's so funny how Hilary Swank's character is the most like gung ho, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed cop.
Yeah,
it's so funny, dude. Because I like, again, I rewatched this one, and how she's like, man, I can't wait for some exciting things to happen in this town. Like, she literally says that, and I'm like, oh my god, we get it.
Yeah.
You want to be a cop, and you want to be an exciting cop, but I get that's part of her character. But any last word on Insomnia before we move on?
Nah, I mean, this is one of Nolan's. I mean, a lot of people sleep on this one. No pun intended. Yeah. But it's a pretty good.
Can't sleep on this one.
Right. But yeah, I think is one of his more. I think it's one of his more funner movies. It's not like necessarily. It's still very deep and very personal, but it's not like in the same.
It's not as heavy as his other movies.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of more of a fun.
Cop thriller movie. Yeah. I 100% agree. Let's move on to The Prestige. The Prestige is crazy. Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale. This movie is what a lot of people consider to be their favorite Nolan movie.
Really?
Oh yeah, a ton of people. I love this movie, to be completely honest. I rewatched this one as well on Netflix. It's on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, or if you want to see it again, watch it on Netflix. But this one is super layered in the sense of how many different themes and how many different questions Nolan brings up in this movie. But essentially, Michael Caine opens up this movie with
like the testimony kind of.
Yeah, he opens it up with the three-act structure of a magic trick, which essentially is a metaphor for the three-act structure of a movie as well. Which is what does he say? It's the act, the turn, and the prestige. What is it?
I think that's what some.
I forget what the first one is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
But essentially, he's talking about. This is another one dealing with reality and perception of reality and deception, right, and manipulation, right? Because a magic trick is all about. Basically, they're illusionists, right? So they're all about creating a perception or a deception in order to manipulate the audience into believing something that's not there without having the audience question it too much.
Right.
Because the whole point of it is to not have too much of a question in there. Otherwise, it becomes not a magic trick. It becomes something either immoral or corrupt, or it becomes something uninteresting.
Right.
But essentially, I think, because there's a lot of interpretations on this movie, because it's a very, like I said, dense movie. It's a very dense movie. But I believe it's the biggest notion that I get from it is mainly obsession, because that's the easiest one to kind of pinpoint, because it is about the obsession of these two characters, Christian Bale's character and Hugh Jackman's character, about trying to one-up each other in a weird kind of psychotic rivalry that they have going on, a very psychotic rivalry, if you consider it. Because it's funny, man. Rewatch this movie. Did you rewatch this one, by the way?
No.
Dude, rewatch this movie. It's like they kind of go a little hard. Because at first it's like, all right, I'm gonna try to beat you, and then obviously, Christian Bale's character kills his wife by tying the other knot that he wasn't supposed to tie for her to escape from the tank.
Yeah.
And then she's unable to escape, and ever since then, it became like.
Trying to assassinate you.
Trying to kill you, and then I'm going to take off your hand. Well, I'm going to take this. Well, I'm going to take your life. Well, I'm going to take your daughter. Well, I'm going to shoot you and your prestige and your freaking show. And it's like this crazy, like, it becomes psychotic in a sense, where they're like reading each other's journals. And it's basically like, screw you, bro. I won. Ha ha, you're dead, bro. And you're like, shit. Like, it becomes so hardcore as far as how far these guys go in order to complete their obsession with beating each other, to the point of like, I love the idea of Hugh Jackman's character with the showmanship and Christian Bale's character with the talent, because they really make it a point in this movie to tell you the difference between talent and showmanship, and how Christian Bale, Michael Caine says it in the movie. He says he's a better magician than you are. He's better. He really is. No matter what you do, he's just going to beat you. He's going to kick your ass. But you're a better showman than he is. So all you have to do is copy him. And as soon as you copy him, you're a better showman, immediately, instantly better. People will like you like so much more because of your showmanship. And it's the difference between the combination of talent or the stealing of someone's talent with showmanship. What do you get from this movie? What's like the biggest theme you get out of it? Because like I said, there's like 10 different themes in the movie.
Right. I mean, this is another example, I think, of Nolan's using his flair for the temporal design of the editing sense of how to me, as I always thought it was interesting as film lovers and filmmakers, how you can use editing to kind of allude to magic tricks in and of itself, right? How the feel of editing and how cuts can be used to hide mystery and reveal things. I think this movie exploits that to its fullest potential, all the way down to a story structure as well. If I'm being 100, I kind of don't like this movie.
Really?
Yeah.
What the hell, man? Why not?
Rewatch
it, bro.
Yeah,
rewatch it right now, man.
Rewatch it.
Netflix, bro. Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix. I don't know, man. I've watched it like 2 or 3 times. It just to me, I think the biggest thing to me is like I don't know. Maybe it's just I don't connect to what they're doing is. I guess I think they're both kind of crazy.
Well, they are though.
Yeah, they are, and I don't know. I mean, I don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I get it, but it's like I don't get what's the point of like showing each other like fucking. It's like a dick swinging contest the entire movie.
It really is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sometimes you gotta swing dick, bro.
And then, I guess so.
In a magical way.
Yeah, it's like it's a sword fit. Sword fighting.
It's a magical sword fight.
Yeah, and I don't.
I don't feel like watching that.
Yeah, I don't want to watch that. And I guess it's cool. I think for me the biggest takeaway from this movie is his commentary on like the creative process, how the audience is manipulable in the same way through cinema, in the same way they can be through magic. And I think there's some telling things in this movie that really do work. I think the whole twist at the end where we discover that Christian Bale's character is actually like twins or whatever. Mm-hmm. The fact that Hugh Jackman. I mean, I don't know, man. There's a lot of parts in this I don't like. Like every time he comes home to his wife, whether it's like Scarlett Johansson or Rebecca Hall.
Ooh, Rebecca Hall, man. Talking about my wife right there, bro.
Really?
Oh, I love Rebecca Hall, man. I just rewatched Iron Man 3 the other day because I'm doing my MCU rewatch.
Oh no.
Rebecca Hall, man.
Yeah. Do you like Iron Man 3?
You know what's funny? I was literally talking to a friend about it right now.
Yeah.
At work. I didn't like it the first time I saw it. I walked out of it, and my brother and I saw it together, and we were like, eh. I rewatched it last night. It's not bad. It's not bad. Once you like take it in as like for what it is, like a much more Shane Black comedy. It's a Shane Black comedy. It's what it is. I like it. I like it.
I'm not gonna lie.
I did. This is the first. You know what's funny? It's the first time I saw it since watching it in theaters.
Oh really?
You believe that? That's crazy.
Wow.
Like I haven't seen it since theaters.
That's wild.
Because I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
So I never rewatched it. Because
Yeah.
I've rewatched every other MCU movie, but I never rewatched Iron Man 3 because I was just like, it's cool. It's whatever. I don't really care for it. But then I rewatched it and I was like, all right, it's okay. Yeah. It's not bad. It's a lot funnier than I remembered.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't for me. It wasn't like I just didn't dislike it. It was like a venomous hatred to me when I first walked out of it. Yeah.
I didn't like when I first saw it. I remember just not liking it. My brother and I were like, that wasn't that great.
Yeah.
But rewatching it, I was like, it's funnier than I thought. It's not as bad.
Yeah.
I still think Captain America: First Avenger is way worse. I
Really?
don't like Captain America: First Avenger. I like Haley Atwell. Shout out to Haley Atwell.
Hey man, she's great.
She's great, but Captain America: First Avenger is so mediocre to me.
Yeah, I think that one's more mediocre. To me, it wasn't.
It's so cheesy. So cheesy.
It wasn't to me. Iron Man 3 wasn't the fact that it was like
a Shane Black comedy.
Yeah, it wasn't just mediocre. It was like they were actively trying to fuck up people. You know what I mean? And I really don't like that. Like
what do you mean?
Just
Ben Kingsley?
That whole thing. The stuff with the kid was like, what am I watching?
The stuff with the kid, I hated that when I first saw it. I rewatched it. It's not as bad as I remembered. It's fine.
I literally had to rewatch this movie when it came out on like home video. It showed on Stars. I literally like watched it like 6 times when it came out on Stars just to see like what can I pull out of it that I really like.
Sure.
And I think the biggest part of that for me was like when I was watching in theaters. When I was watching the first 45 minutes of that movie, it was like I looked over to my buddy. I was like, "Yo, this is the greatest Marvel movie ever made. This is just straight up is all the way to the point where they're blowing up his house. Like this is by bar none the best Marvel movie ever." And it just completely loses it for me. I don't know, man.
You thought the twist was a little too comedic?
I thought there's also a lot of things that just didn't make sense. Like the whole Rebecca Hall storyline to me like didn't make any sense.
Why?
Like she was just there, she just kind of shows up randomly, walks into their fucking house, and then like gets kidnapped and then killed. Like there was nothing. Like I don't get it. Like
hey,
what was the whole point?
Sometimes you just need that Rebecca Hall in your life, man.
That's crazy. Apparently, there's that movie that she was in, Christine, I think it is, that came out recently.
Oh shit, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I did. I didn't see it either, but I think they put it on. They put it either on Netflix or
it's
Amazon.
on Hulu.
Oh, Hulu.
Yeah,
Hulu.
I saw it because I was scrolling through Hulu the other day because I was watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Go watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it was on. Oh yeah, I'm wearing my Gemma Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. bro. Go watch it. Gemma Simmons.
Yeah.
Hashtag Gemma Simmons for life.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's on Hulu. I mean, I want to watch it for sure.
I gotta check that out. Definitely.
Rebecca Hall is baller, dude. She's a baller. Anyways, back to The Prestige. If Rebecca Hall was my wife, I would never cheat on her with Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
You're like, whoa. I mean, it's Scarlett Johansson, though. I mean, come on now.
Let's be real here.
Let's be real now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know where the problem is necessarily for me in this movie.
Is it just too many twists for you, maybe?
I guess so. And then
because there is a lot of twists. There's like, he's my brother. He's not. He's my twin. No, he's not. Wait, he's a clone. Wait, what's going on?
Yeah,
Tesla.
It's like they're trying too hard. And the whole exactly like the whole Tesla.
I
thing,
love
like,
Tesla shit.
Yeah,
I love it. I love freaking Bowie as Tesla, bro.
Yeah, he was good. He was good acting wise.
That was dope.
Yeah, I just
Andy Serkis, bro. Andy Serkis, man. Come on.
I don't know. I didn't get it, man. I didn't get the point. And like I don't know. But then like ultimately, it just added up to nothing, though, right? Like essentially.
No, not really. It's who. It's in a battle of obsession, in a battle of rivalries. Who loses their soul first? Essentially, what is the movie about, right? Because slowly but surely, Hugh Jackman loses his soul and loses his morality to the point that he has a battle of who is more deprived. To the point that he becomes so deprived that he's willing to take away this guy's family. And then this guy becomes even more deprived and kills him and then takes back his family. So it is a weird kind of like sadistic, psychotic rivalry in a way. You're right. They're both kind of bad guys in this movie.
Yeah.
They're both kind of evil in a sense because it's like they kind of get a kick out of ruining each other's lives. It's kind of sadistic in a sense, and it's very sadistic. But I enjoy it because I think it's just a weird, crazy movie that has a lot of interesting points and things to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's also another one of the Nolan overly exposition movies.
Oh, it has a lot of it, yeah.
It's like almost to the point, it's like almost every line of dialogue is like some information being spit at you.
Yeah.
Which is mostly fine for the most part.
And it's Michael Caine explaining it too.
Yeah. And
or Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman explains a lot in this movie.
Yeah, and they just, it's putting me a little asleep, kind of sometimes. And when I'm watching that film. But I mean, again, I appreciate what the movie was doing. I get the themes. I get what they're aiming for. I get the the whole idea of the mysticism behind the magic and where does that drive, the internal psyche, where the and then how their whole battle between each other is they battle between the internal and the external, from like where Christian Bale's character, his whole thing is more of his whole interpretation of magic is the deception, is the manipulation, is the more external stuff. But Hugh Jackman is really trying to crack down to the meat of it. What is magic really about? How does this manipulation thing really work? How can you truly deceive the audience, not just from deception, but from actually manipulation of like time and physics and all that kind of stuff? I get that. And I also get, his commentary on the creative process as well. I don't know. It's just not a movie.
It's also like I like the idea of like, and I know it's crazy and it's weird because it is weird in the movie, but the idea of like what happens when real magic infects fake magic or intersects with fake magic, right? Yeah. What happens when Hugh Jackman plays with actual, scientific powers that has the ability of cloning himself to the point that he can use that as a fake magic trick. because if like he says in the movie, if it becomes a reality, the audience doesn't see that as like cool. They see that as like, whoa, that's creepy as hell, and it's just weird and it's evil. But the fact that he plays with powers that are bigger than themselves in order to pretend to play with a bigger power, it's such an interesting way. But it's the theatricality of perception. It's the perception of something that isn't there. So if I create something real, but I tell you it's not quite as real, even though it is, right? I like that idea. I like the idea of like real magic with fake magic, and how he has to cover up the realness of it in order for it to be fantastical. Because if it's real, it's not fantastical anymore. I think that's super cool, but you're tripping, man. Go watch it on Netflix. Let's move on to his next film, which I believe to be
Inception.
Yes, Inception, 2010. Yes. This is the movie that followed The Dark Knight. This is one where people were very much waiting to see what he would bring.
How his follow-up to what many consider the greatest
superhero movie of all, one of the greatest movies of all time, in my opinion. But Inception is honestly it's surprisingly a very personal movie for me and my family. Just because I remember watching this. I watched this with some friends of mine, and then I rewatched it with my family. We love this movie so much. My brother and I love this freaking movie. It's so good, and we get such a kick out of it because it deals with so many different themes and so many. This is probably one of the most layered Christopher Nolan movies. In fact, I would say it's one of the most layered movies in general. Like, just a very layered movie. And it's funny how I say layered because it's literally layers of dreams. But in the sense of, like, it deals with a lot. And it deals with not only the narrative on paper and on screen, but the narrative outside of screen and in a meta kind of sense as far as film in general and your perception of film, as far as what your perception of a dream is, and as far as your perception of what's going on in the story is. But there's so many themes in this movie, and it really shows. I feel like this movie, more than any other Nolan movie, starts to show his genius, if that makes any sense. Whereas, like, you're like, this guy's really talented, and then you see Inception, and you're like, yo, this guy's nuts. Like, he's crazy smart, and he came up with something that's. I've said this before. This is one of those movies that I believe to be, and I've told this to my brother, and I went on a podcast and talked about this when we talked about anime and movies. But this is the most anime live action movie I've seen, if that makes any sense. Right. Anime is very much deals with. You know why I'm cool with Nolan? Right. And you know why I'm cool with his exposition? Because I'm an anime fan. And watch anime. Literally. Have you seen, I don't know how much anime you've seen, but if you watch anime is so exposition heavy, it's not even funny. Like, a lot of people love Death Note. Go rewatch Death Note. Death Note has so much exposition. So much exposition. Go rewatch Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell has a lot of exposition. Go rewatch Standalone Complex. A lot of exposition. Almost any anime that's regarded as an all-time great anime has a ton of exposition. And I feel like this movie, which is loosely based on the anime Paprika, I don't know if you knew that too, is one of the most anime live action movies I've ever seen. And that is very key into making a true live action anime movie. Because a lot of people have asked me, what does it take to make a true live action anime movie and make it successful? This is what it takes. It takes a loose interpretation, not a tight interpretation, because a tight interpretation, you fall into the territory of trying to live up to the original, and you never will. A loose interpretation, and then you take the elements of the anime, make something original, and make it something as big and as grandiose as what an anime can be. That is Inception in a nutshell. It's a live action anime film. It's crazy, it's big, the ideas are heavy, the ideas are dense, it's a lot of exposition, but it's so well done that you can't ignore the greatness of it. Yeah, and that's just my idea.
No, I mean, definitely. I remember watching this movie initially in theaters and really loving it as well. Upon, later times, I kind of, some of my, again, the problems with the exposition does kind of come up in this one a lot too, but I definitely think this one, you know, upon rewatching it again, I've watched this movie so many times, man. Like this is probably one of the ones I've watched probably more than any. But then rewatching it again for today's podcast, it did come down to me, like, you know, the exposition is obviously a big part of it, but it's largely accompanied by some really beautiful visuals too. I think that's a crucial part of what makes this movie so successful. That being said, I mean, I remember when this movie came out, and when people were like rail on the Nolan movie back then, it would cause like the biggest uproar. You remember that like little kid who was like 13 years old at the time, like Action Jackson? You remember that? There's a whole thing, like there's like 13-year-old movie reviewer. His name was Action Jackson, right? He went in the fucking news. He said or like his local news station, and he said that he didn't like Inception because he thought that like Ellen Page in that movie was just like being dumped, like she was like the exposition dump of that movie. Like everybody had to explain stuff to her for the audience to to get it.
Playing the audience member.
Yeah,
that's the point of her character.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, in the bigger meta-analysis of this film as a film piece, I think what makes this movie super interesting, me watching it now, is seeing how the whole crew is supposed to reflect a different aspect of like the movie making process, right? How Cobb is supposed to be the director, author is the producer. Ellen Page's character, Adriana, I think, what's her name?
Oh my God.
I don't know how to pronounce it. I have it spelled here.
Eridani.
All right.
Aridnati.
Whatever.
It's like a Greek.
It's from Greek mythology. Yes, the mistress of the labyrinth, who's largely associated with making mazes,
which
to
is
protect
where,
yeah.
It's very clearly where Nolan got it.
Right, absolutely. And
she has like a connection to Theseus, right?
Yes, Theseus. Okay. Yeah, it's a Theseus. Yeah, and the Minotaur and all that stuff. So very interesting Greek mythology kind of references there. But she's kind of, to me, she's like the production designer of the crew. You know, she's kind of setting up.
The
locate, you know, that kind of stuff. Soto is like the foreign financier that often comes into Hollywood movies these days. Like the big Chinese oversee investors. Yeah, just kind of paying the money. He has like really cool line where they're like, we need a plane, and he's like, oh, I just bought the airline. Like that's pretty funny. Apparently, you know, that Nash guy at the very beginning is kind of like the screenwriter of it all too, right? Like as soon as he messes up, he gets killed, shipped off. That's, you know, often the journey of many screenwriters in Hollywood. And then of course Fisher. To me, Fisher is is supposed to represent the audience, right? To me, he's the person who the crew manipulates through and through throughout the entire film.
That's right.
And you can even see, I was rewatching, and to me, one of the most powerful scenes in the movie is that scene at the end when he goes back and meets his father when they're like in the third level of the dream, and he has that big monologue set where, you know, not monologue, but that whole sequence where he sees the little fan that they made when they were kids, and I don't know, it was a very emotional scene, and it's crazy how emotional that scene is when it's really a text within the text of it's supposed to emotionally manipulate Fisher because he is because he wants, you know, they want to change his mind. It's that whole corporate espionage thing, but like it's just so interesting how Nolan literally uses every tool of manipulation in that scene to affect us emotionally as the audience. Even though the whole point of that scene is to emotionally affect him. You know what I mean? It's like very, very, it's like extra meta in that sense.
It's meta on top of meta.
Yeah. And then you see Tom Hardy's character come in. It's like, come on, let's wrap this up. Like, that to me is like, it almost takes you out of it, but it's like, oh, I get it. Like, this is what
Nolan's a genius, bro.
Yeah.
That's genius, bro.
Yeah, it's really funny. And, you know, it's just, you know, to say, you know, this movie, he originally pitched this thing in 2002, right after he did Insomnia, if I'm not mistaken, and then he kind of tinkered with the script for like 8 years, just kept tinkering with it each and every time, and there's like a lot of thought being put into each kind of character and what is really having to say. I also like, in preparation for the show, I watched this thing on YouTube. There's a thing called Inception in real time, where they show like the 4 different levels of dream.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
Yeah, and how they all kind of line up in like this really like weird and convoluted way. This is really nice. That there's that much thought put into how each level affects each level and the impact of which that affects each other too. I think this movie's overall genius. It touches on, I mean, going back to that whole point of the Action Jackson kid, you know, that whole thing of like him, of Ellen Page being the kind of person who Leonardo DiCaprio kind of has to dump all the exposition on. It's kind of a valid point, honestly. To me personally, it's like when I'm watching this film, only thing I could that scene is beautiful where they're like, particularly the anime, you know, references where they're walking down the courtyard and mirrors are all turning and fruits like exploding. It's definitely beautiful, but for me, it's like during that part, I almost kind of have to turn the sound off. It's like, oh, really? All I'm getting is just like information after information after information on that front.
Again, man, I might be, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm speaking for anime fans, but I really do feel like as an anime fan, I'm so used to like seeing anime Japanese and reading all that giant text and reading it. It is kind of like it really like watching anime. Like a lot of people are like. Somebody said it. I think it was T when I was talking about it on the Schmoes Know podcast last year. I was talking about Ghost in the Shell, and she's like, "Yeah, I rewatched the anime, and I forgot how much exposition is in that. Holy shit! Like, I really don't like that." And I was like, "Yeah, that's anime."
I mean, like Akira's like that.
Akira's like that. Like people forget that anime is just exposition, writing, explanation, because the kinds of worlds that. The entire point of an anime is to take a concept, to take a world and amplify it times 10, whether it be Sword Art Online, whether it be Ghost in the Shell, whatever the anime is. You're taking a sci-fi world or whatever kind of world it is, a fantastical world. So my job as an anime creator or as an anime person is to explain that to you as much as I can so you can dive right into the movie. Or the series, whatever it is, which is why Inception to me is like, this is like the epitome of that. It's original, it's fun, it's meta, it has different interpretations, different meanings, it's got layers to it, it's got analogies of characters, what Cobb represents, it's got perception of reality, it's got the idea of dreams. It's got the idea of corporate espionage that I love, because I love that angle of it that a lot of people kind of ignore. The idea of family, the idea of connection, the idea of love, the idea of memory, the idea of your perception of what is and what isn't. Again, it deals with the Nolan's idea of belief and what you choose to believe versus what is. Or leaving clues for yourself so you can believe in yourself, like Memento, where it's like you reinforce your own beliefs. It deals with so many different things that to me it's just a perfect film. It really is. It's incredible the way that Nolan is able to deal with so many different themes, and it's also, like you said, a kind of like a metaphor on film itself and how it deals with the perception of an audience as far as what a film is, in the same way of a dream, and how we perceive a dream the same way we perceive a film, because we're so used to dreaming in the sense of like appearing right in the middle of a scene or appearing right in the middle of an act. That's the same way Nolan explains dreaming in Inception,
and just randomly cutting to like different locations, and you know, how does that happen? You know, it's
time.
Yeah, and film is definitely very much a medium that reflects the notion of dreams that we have in and of ourselves. The projection of what we project on the silver screen is how we ultimately, or is how we interpret film is almost similar in the way that we interpret dreams in terms of the cuts, our movement and passage through time, how in dreams we could spend days, weeks, months, years inside of one dream. We're only sleeping for 8 hours. Same way in the movie, we could spend years with the characters, with people, and with figures for a long, super long period of time within like a 2 to 3 hour span. I think it's really interesting in that front. And I definitely think, I think this, going back to like the film analogy in and of itself, how Cobb is the director and how his wife, Maul, is played by Marianne Cotillard. By the way, Maul is French for bad. So, I guess pretty heavy.
It's also Spanish for bad, too.
Yeah, Spanish for bad. Hey, Spanish 3, baby. Let's go. But how no matter what he does, it's in the same way as a director, no matter what is troubling him subconsciously, that's always going to be put into the film. See that in every director. I mean, that's essentially the core of the auteur theory, right? In film is like the director is always going to have some sort of influence on the director's personality and fears and woes as a person is always going to influence what the film is in and of itself. And in that sense is Maul in this case. Like her subconscious, her place in his subconscious is always going to influence whatever job he does, no matter what. And that's very troubling for somebody who is like a financier like Sato, who just wants to, who is just there for the investment, there for the corporate espionage part of it, just wanting to buy out the entire, who's looking to buy out the entire thing. So it's really crazy how who's looking to buy out the other company that Cillian Murphy's character is trying to own.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to say. But like how he just wants the job just done straightforward, but everybody's kind of warning him like, hey, be careful with this Cobb dude. Everybody's kind of warning each other like, be careful with Cobb because he definitely can't escape that. And I think that's in the same way that directors can't escape their own fears, their own woes.
Interesting.
And it's very much like representative like that battle between the internal and the external that always comes up in Nolan's films too, right? Where we talked about The Prestige, how it's the battle between the physical magic versus the illusion of magic, and how this movie is kind of the battle between our consciousness, our awake selves, our present selves versus our dream selves, and our subconscious, and what lies underneath the physical. The physical aspects of life itself. So I think it definitely, and it kind of relates a lot to like old school, like Hindu kind of culture and Eastern religious kind of ideologies. The idea that the dream is the primary like dream, like the dream is the primary like kind of like wish fulfillment time, and also just the most prominently like the self-reflective moments that we're battling within ourselves. So it's very interesting. Again, I say interesting, but very, very, very kind of deep and philosophical approach to like how this movie kind of plays itself out. So.
2 more questions before I finish off. Well, one more question and then I'll finish off with a point.
Yeah.
The spinning top. Let's talk about it.
Right.
As far as, first of all, Nolan's decision to leave it on that frame with that slight little tip.
Yeah.
And second of all, the question of, was he dreaming this whole time?
Right.
Mr. RB3, what do you think?
Well, first of all, it goes back to another theme in like all of Nolan's movies too, the trust that we put into objects, right? How every character needs like a totem to kind of discern if they're like really dreaming or really not dreaming, and how that influences each person as an individual. Again, another theme that we see in Memento and other films as well. Is he dreaming? I mean, ultimately, I think he's not necessarily, but we don't know if we're actually living in his dream the entire time or not. What if it's somebody else's dream? What if it's really Ma's dream the entire time, right? Why is he using her totem, right? That's her totem. The spinning top is her totem. When she dies, he adopts that totem, but that's not his own personal physical totem, because if more than two people know about one's totem, that defeats the purpose. So whenever he spins the totem, is that really his own test? If it's his wife as well, how we not know we're not living in her dream and the totem's just spinning according to whether or not it dictates that or not. So it's very heady. Well, I ultimately think if we're going by the logic of the movie and we're going by the established time and frame that the movie presents us, no, it's not a dream. It's very clearly not a dream. They very clearly come back to reality. I think only to further highlight, I mean, we never see the kids' faces, but I think what further highlights the fact that it's real is that there's different actors, and you can look in the IMDb credits for this too. There's different actors that play the kids in the flashback sequences before versus who plays the kids now when he actually like wakes up. Different actors. So for me, that all but confirms that this is supposed to be reality, because it's the same shit. But they're wearing the same outfit too, so it's very complex in that field too. If they're wearing the same outfit, is that just a coincidence or what's happening? So very deliberate choices here. Ultimately, a lot of people land on it doesn't matter. I think it almost does kind of matter if there's a dream or not. because if it's not a dream, there's that whole emotional catharsis right from the very beginning. Like if he's not dreaming, the goal has been accomplished. The wish fulfillment has been fulfilled. There's optimism in dreaming in and of itself. But if he's not dreaming, then we're talking about how we use dreams as our kind of escape too, and also another meta commentary how we use movies as escapism as well. So I don't know. It's a tough question to answer. What's your position?
I'm in the same boat, man. I think the film clearly says that he's not, and that he's back to reality, especially with the kids thing that you just said. I think that pretty much nails it on the head, I guess you can say. But again, it's an interesting point you bring up about the totem. I never considered that. But I do like the way that Nolan still leaves it up to interpretation. I think that's just fun.
Yeah.
At first, I hated it, and then I was just like, all right, I see you, man. Because I remember at first I was like, screw you, man. You can't do that to me.
Yeah.
But the one thing I want to end on is the idea, and man, I freaking love this. Go watch... obviously, Ghost in the Shell is a very popular anime movie, but go watch Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, because it doesn't deal with the... Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex deals with the idea, and you've seen Ghost in the Shell, hacking into someone's brain.
Right.
So it's not necessarily into dreams and all that, but the idea of hacking into someone's brain. But they do deal, especially in Standalone Complex, the series, they do deal with the idea of that kind of power through the hands of corporate espionage. Meaning, if I have the ability to hack into your brain, I also have the ability to hack into company secrets and financial secrets and stock secrets and intellectual property and stuff like that, that this movie kind of touches on through dreams. And Standalone Complex deals with that, with the same kind of ideas as far as like security and people coming out, and the version of security is like people shooting you and stuff like that. Just that in general, the fact that Christopher Nolan did that and the fact that Standalone Complex did that reinforces my idea and my belief that this is a very anime movie in that sense, because that idea is just so freaking cool. The idea of like, I can hack into, if I really had the ability to do that stuff, to hack into people and to hack into people's dreams, or in Ghost in the Shell, hack into people's brains, to steal high-level billion-dollar secrets is what people would do. I mean, that's common sense. I mean, if I had that kind of power, I wouldn't just be like hacking into people and being like, you're going to dance like a monkey. No, I'd be like, you're going to give me $30 billion. That's what I would do. And that's the kind of people we would get into. We would get into the brains of CEOs and stuff like that. So the fact that that idea is seen in Ghost in the Shell in the sense of hacking is just freaking cool. I love the ideas that Nolan is able to implement into this movie and make it into a very believable live action film. I just think it's awesome. Let's move on to his next movie, which is Interstellar, right?
Yes, Interstellar.
RB3's favorite Nolan movie?
Yeah, it's probably my least favorite. By the way,
bro.
one of my least favorites. I would definitely say Inception is up there as number 3 for me.
Okay. As far as your favorites?
Yeah, number 1, The Dark Knight. Number 2, a movie we'll be talking about a little later.
I don't think I could. I don't think I could pick, bro. It's so hard.
Yeah.
I guess afterwards I'll pick my top 3, but it'll be tough.
This one's on the lower end of the spectrum.
You know what's funny, man? Let's talk about the lead up to this film a little bit, real quick. This movie, when this movie was coming out, people were like so hyped for this movie.
People were losing their balls, dude.
It was crazy because it was coming out in November, and I remember that trailer was just like so hyped.
People thought this was gonna be the best picture winner like ever. Like people were like, this is gonna be the greatest motion picture ever made, the best sci-fi movie. You know, Kubrick would be like coming back from the grave, and he directed this. Like that's what people went in thinking.
He's gonna rise from the dead.
Yeah, and he's gonna be reincarnated in the
it was really, it was so hyped, man, that I really do feel like that is probably the biggest detriment of the movie. Because when it came out, I remember people got to see the movie. People, meaning people like Christian and Mark and all them, saw it before I did. And I remember hearing their thoughts on the movie. And I remember being so let down by their thoughts because they were like really disappointed. I remember like Mark and Christian being like, oh, this was like whack and it was terrible. And a lot of people said it was like super whack. And I remember myself thinking, oh no, like I was so hyped for this movie. I don't know about you, but I was hyped for this movie, bro. That my expectations just went down the drain. Like it literally, like as soon as I heard people being like, yo, it was whack, it was terrible. And I was like, really? Yeah, it was bad. And I was like, oh, okay. My expectations just went like, boo. So when I went to go see it, I was like, I'll go see it, but it's going to be whatever. It's going to be whack like they told me. And I came out and I was like, yo, y'all were tripping. Yeah. That was dope, man. Yeah. It's not the best movie of all time or anything like that, but it's not whack at all. It's actually really good. Like, that's my opinion, obviously. And I know a lot of people might disagree with me, but this movie is just so ambitious and so bold and so out there and so interesting. And the fact that Nolan just, every time you think he's going to take a step back, he takes 2 steps forward. Like, that's the kind of director he is, where it's like, how do you follow up something like Inception, where it deals with incredible, giant, enormous questions, and then he follows it up by doing bigger questions as far as like existence in the universe and beings that are far ahead of us. Fifth dimensional beings and interdimensional travel and different universes and parallel dimensions and wormholes, and like, holy shit, this movie's awesome. I love ambitiousness. I love ambitious films. I love scientific questions that deal with something bigger than us. That to me is like something that I've always loved. I even if you don't hit it out of the park, so to speak, the fact that you can handle it and juggle it and just be like juggling it is good enough for me. Like, if you can juggle something like this with all these questions, props to you, man. That's my opinion on it. I don't know what your opinion on it. I know you said it's one of your least favorites, but what do you not like about this movie, I guess? Or what do you do like about it?
Well, no, I mean, I would definitely say, as an ambitious piece, as a visual spectacle, this is one of the most beautiful movies ever made, no doubt. From the straight up, like, visual effects, from the cinematography. This is the first collaboration without Wally Pfister. Pfister was busy shooting his directorial debut with
amazing movie. Amazing movie.
What was that movie called?
Transcendence.
Beautiful. Didn't Finstock have like a hand in that or something? Or?
He probably did. Yeah. That's why it's got a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. From producer Bobby Finstock.
So I'm not sure. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange how we're probably doxing Finstock. We probably whatever.
He's cool.
That shit came out whenever it go. Yeah, no. So for me, what I love about Interstellar is the visuals, the scope. I love the whole beginning with the John Steinbeck, like Grapes of Wrath kind of opening. It's so sandy, depression, but set in the future. I like the little touches of like the world that they're building with like the textbooks taking out the moon landing because it was supposedly fake, which, by the way, never mind, I shouldn't say that, but I kind of think that's true. I'm not gonna say that though, people, because
even though you just said it,
conspiracy theorists are not are frowned upon, and I don't want to be frowned upon. But no,
I'm frowning in my heart.
So, but yeah, no, it's interesting how they play with that like kind of world, like the whole futurism, but. Which is kind of weird. It takes place so far in the future, but they're still driving like modern cars, weirdly enough. But that being said, though, I do enjoy like how it's all sandy, how they only have corn left, so they're eating like all corn products. I enjoy all that, and I actually enjoy sitting there because I saw this thing, the way it's supposed to be projected, 70mm IMAX, in those IMAX seats, and like the whole thing was so loud that when they took off in the spaceship, like you were just shaking and rattling like along with it.
It was loud. I remember that.
Yeah. I'm like, damn, this is beautiful. But then there are just parts where I'm just like, all right, like the music is way too loud here. I don't know why.
I love it. Yeah. I love it when Hans Zimmer is screaming at me.
Yeah.
Every time. In Blade Runner 2049, he screamed at me.
Oh, no.
In Interstellar, he screamed at me. He screamed at me in Dark Knight. Like, when Hans Zimmer screams at you, you know you're in a good movie.
Yeah.
Like Gladiator, he screamed at me too. Like
the screaming in Gladiator was a lot better than
it's beautiful. Every time Hans Zimmer screams at you, you feel it in your heart, in your soul.
Hey man,
this is dope.
I like Hans Zimmer.
Man of Steel, he screamed at me in Man of Steel. I loved it. I was like, keep screaming, bro.
I love him screaming at me. I don't want him pulling my ears to his fucking mouth.
I love it.
You know, I'm trying to hear that. I will say though, the music is very beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Probably one of the best Hans Zimmer scores he's done. Which is weird because like this year was like the one year that he decided like he didn't want to campaign for Oscars.
Yeah,
which is strange. I think this is easily, for one, I think it's easily his
2049.
best. Oh no, for this one.
Oh, for this one.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I think the year it came out, he specifically was like, "Oh, I'm not campaigning for Oscars."
Oh, dude, he would have.
For me, this is
it's incredible.
For me, this is easily like the best Nolan and Zimmer collaboration. To me, without a doubt.
Yeah. Even though Dark Knight's pretty dope too.
Dark Knight's dope, but I think with the usage of like the piano and the violins, the
you're right.
Ostinatos, it's beautiful. It's amazing. And I think this is probably the best looking Nolan film he's ever done from a visual standpoint. The whole stuff when they're in spaces, going to those different planets.
Those different planets look dope.
Yeah. All of the visual interpretations of that was amazing, even down to the water planet. But then, like, I have very specific problems with this movie. And again, I think this movie does a lot of things really well. The things that it doesn't do well, it kind of really fucks up, I think. Like the whole thing where, like, they're on the water planet, and Anne Hathaway is there, and what's his face? Beatty is his name, not Beatty. The
Seneca Crane.
Is that his name?
That's his name in Hunger Games.
Oh yeah. That guy, exactly.
I know my Hunger Games, bro.
Oh yeah, I've read those books too. He was in American Beauty as well. His name's slipping my mind.
Wes Bentley.
There we go.
Seneca Crane.
Seneca Crane.
That's all you need to know, man. Shout out to Hunger Games movies. I love you guys.
No, he was. I like how he was in this movie, how he was used, but then he just died. Like it was so easily avoidable how he couldn't have not have died.
That's true.
And then they're like, oh, and then like they drown the ship, and they're like, oh, okay. How long are we stuck here? We're stuck here for 2 hours, and have like a 9-minute. They have like a 5-minute conversation, and then they're me like, okay, ships are back in lockdown. It's like we could go. What happened? Am I losing my mind here? Or it kind of put my mind through like that weird blender thing, you know what I mean? So I was like, I don't know. And then they go back up, have a really great emotional scene with like McConaughey just like looking at the old footage. That was really heartbreaking.
That was beautiful. Yeah. That was like Matthew McConaughey acting. Like that made me feel, bro. Yeah. That made me feel. I really did. Because it's like watching your kids grow up and all the years you've missed. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Mm-hmm. Like I don't even have kids and I was like in tears, man.
Yeah.
Like that's deep.
So that was dope, and then they kind of immediately follow with more exposition, more monologues. Oh, and I feel so bad. Who's that brother, man? The
David Oyelowo.
No. The older dude, the older cat who was in there, who was up in the ship, because David Oyelowo was at the beginning as like the principal.
Michael Caine?
No.
John Lithgow?
No. It was an older black dude who was in this movie.
It was David Oyelowo, wasn't it?
No. David Oyelowo was the principal at the school, I think, in the beginning, but then like.
It wasn't this guy.
They had. I can't remember.
Are you sure it wasn't Oyelowo?
I'm like 99% sure. It was somebody. It was I can't remember his name, but. Anyway, when they came back to the ship.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, when they came back to the ship and he was like, oh, how long have you been waiting? It was like 90 years or some shit like that.
No, it was like 23 years.
23 years, yeah, something like that. Not 90 years, yeah. But 23 years. And it was like this great beer. I'm like, oh, dude, I feel so bad.
Dude,
like,
you know what's so funny?
Yeah.
I will not lie to you, and I've always told this story, but I think it's so funny. That when I first saw this movie in theaters, and they were like, 1 hour is actually 7 years, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then when they come up to the ship, and then Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey are like, is everything all right? And then the guy comes out and he's got like a gray beard.
Yeah.
And he's like, his arms crossed and he's like, I've been waiting on this ship for 23 years. Yeah. I honestly was like, for a moment, I was like, he's gonna be like, I'm just fucking with you guys. It's been like 2 hours, bro. Like I honestly thought he was gonna break. I don't know why I thought that Christopher Nolan was going to put a joke in this movie. Yeah. And he was going to be like, I've been waiting for 23 years. Nah, I'm just messing with you guys. And he was just going to break, but he never did. And I was like, oh, shit. He really means it.
Yeah.
Damn.
Damn, yeah.
I would have shot myself.
They're like, damn, are you going to get some sleep? And
Yeah.
they're like, did you sleep? And he's like, I slept here now, but I don't want to miss you guys. Like, damn, man.
That
This dude was
sucks.
23 years of his life just by
Like,
himself.
you felt it too,
shit.
man.
Yeah,
that guy was a good actor.
Yeah.
Like, you immediately were like, shit.
Yeah.
That sucks, dude.
Yeah.
But I honestly thought he was going to be like, oh, I'm just messing with you guys.
Yeah.
That would have been funny, but it would have been kind of weird too.
Yeah. No, that was effed up. But I also I did, but yeah. After okay, so all of that happens, and then they ultimately like they have this whole thing on they're explaining more shit, more exposition, and Anne Hathaway does this love monologue, man.
It's the greatest monologue about love of all time. Love transcends dimensions, RB3.
Yo.
Love transcends science, RB3. Love is what conquers all, bro. That's what this movie taught me, man.
I just cannot, under no reasonable circumstances, get over that sequence.
That's,
like,
hey, man.
I just
don't. You can't explain it. You can't reason with it. It's love, man. Don't try to think about it. Just let it be. Let it be.
You know, man. You know, I couldn't believe what I was watching in the theaters. And even when I left the theaters initially, I was like, all right, this was really good. You know, I had a lot of really
wrinkle in time, bro.
Yeah.
With the secret ingredient, it's love.
Yeah.
All this time, it's been love.
Yeah.
It's literally like like he breaks out in song. Love is all I've wanted.
Yeah.
It's a musical all of a sudden. You're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
He's like putting like liquid in and doing science experiments. He's like, love.
Yeah.
Anne Hathaway breaks into Les Miserables.
Yeah. Good acting on her during the monologue.
Yeah.
But it was the worst.
I dreamed of love in space. Hey, man, I would have bought it. I would have been like standing up and clapping, bro.
Oh, my God.
A musical in space by Christopher Nolan, bro. About love.
I would like to see Christopher Nolan like.
Me
musical.
too.
How would that look like? Just like
it'd be Interstellar.
all people in fucking like top hats and canes. Like,
yeah,
hey, we're marching down through the pub today. I don't know. That's not a good British accent. I've been doing I'm doing like a like New Zealand type. Like,
not even
a Tika Waititi type of titty Waititi. You know,
titties and white titties.
Yeah. Oh man, you know I don't like Interstellar, man. If I'm going down this kind of all right. So here's my thing. All right, so
okay, so let's finish it up on this.
All right,
love is what took you out of the movie the most.
The whole thing, and that was whack. And then
we're skipping Dunkirk, by the way.
After
you said all this shit about
no, we're not skipping Dunkirk. Okay, and also the Matt Damon twist. That was ridiculous.
Oh yeah,
that was
but his
ridiculous.
name is Dr. Man.
Yeah, because men are evil. Excellent. Fucking. So it's kind of cringy in that front. And I don't know, there's a lot of like kind of like low key cringy stuff in this movie.
I agree with you that the love one was a little bit of a Disney movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
I bought it though. I don't know. Just
the robot.
Oh, I love Tars. Don't you talk shit about Tars.
Hey, listen, he was good for most of it.
Come on.
Sometimes he got super annoying.
Come on.
And then the new guy, Kit.
He was. Oh, dude, I was gonna make a terrible joke. I'm not even gonna make it.
I want to hear your joke, man. Hey, man. Give the people what they want.
No, it's done. But I just to take away the mic from you so you can stop talking shit, and so we can rush through Dunkirk.
Oh, whoa! Wait a minute. Let's not do that.
I really do feel like the themes in this movie are very interesting. I really do feel like it's about science.
This is probably one of the most philosophical science fiction movies. It takes directly a lot from the work of Dr. Kep Thorne, who is a guy who innovated a lot of talk of black holes and wormholes and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely it definitely pays a lot of close attention to his science.
Real quick, just since you're into I don't know you're into weird shit.
Yeah.
What is your you're into weird shit. What is your interpretation as far as wormholes and black holes and dimensions and time travel and all that shit?
Well, I definitely believe it. I think that's part of why I like this. What I really like about this movie is how it evaluates time as the fourth dimension in and of itself.
Sure.
And how that how time can be how time is the one thing that man can't manipulate, but how a future being, how a fifth dimensional transcendent being has the ability to manipulate time, and how that ultimately is what helps.
It's very Arrival in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, that's why I love Arrival. Arrival is exactly this movie that I wanted. You know what I mean? It's exactly what I wanted from Interstellar.
Yeah. But Arrival is much more on an extraterrestrial front. This one is much more on a humanistic front.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you interpret these fifth dimensional beings. Are they humans that are radically in the future, like thousands and thousands of years in the future, acting as fifth dimensional beings?
Yeah, that's exactly what I interpreted as in this movie, not in real life. Obviously.
Right. We don't know in real life.
In real life, who knows?
Yeah.
In real life, you never know. Maybe Oprah's God in a different dimension. This is A Wrinkle in Time all over again, bro.
30 feet tall.
This is literally A Wrinkle in Time. This movie. It's got Oprah saving Matthew McConaughey and saving a little kid in the future.
Love is the
key in Wrinkle in Time as well. This is literally Christopher Nolan's A Wrinkle in Time.
I don't know, man. So that to me is where he got a little problematic. Was dealing with those.
I like the boldness of this movie. I love. My whole family's super into this shit. My whole family's really into deeper space travel, interdimensional type shit. That's why we love Prometheus, because Prometheus deals with these kind of themes of like beginning of mankind and potential of mankind and origin of man and extraterrestrial beings and what does that mean. This one does it in a much more dimensional front, where my family's also really into dimensional shit. We like talk about that all the time. We're weird, but we deal with it. But that's kind of why I like this movie, because of the boldness of it and because the ideas it presents. I get why people don't like it. This is definitely not something that I was like, I won't be like that kind of person who's like, yo, you guys are crazy, you gotta love this movie. It's like, no, I get it. I get why you don't like this. Trust me, I get it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's very much something that I really do love it, because it deals with so many different themes. Let's jump to Dunkirk, unless you have something else to say about Interstellar.
Interstellar.
Let's jump to Dunkirk. It's cool. That was it for the Meaning of Podcast.
Whoa. Wait a fucking minute. Now, this is my second favorite Nolan film. This is exactly...
I like this movie. I really do. I like this movie. But second favorite? Really?
This is exactly what I'm looking for out of a Nolan movie, man. No dialogue. No fucking exposition. No characters. Just get to the meat of the story. And that's what I love. And I love again, this is another example. And again, Nolan does a really great job of the whole manipulating, editing, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. This is a great example of doing that. How you have 3 concurrent timelines interweaving into its own, but they're all in separate time periods. One taking place over an hour, one taking place over a day.
But it all happens in the same time.
All happens at the same time. It all crescendos at the same moment. I just love that he's able to explore that. Again, as well, I work as an editor, for as a almost profession. So I love seeing editing done really, really well. And this movie does that really, really well.
It won editing, right?
Yeah, one for best editing.
Yeah,
one for,
well deserved.
Yeah, very deserved. And I definitely think just the way that it captures intensity. And I think that's something that we don't see in a lot of movies. I think there was even a quote where he said he wanted to make a VR experience without the headset.
That's right, I heard that quote.
And you totally get that in this movie.
Sure.
That is nonstop. It's visceral. And even though it's PG-13, it's not overly reliant on like blood and guts and violence. It's just a straight up war movie where we're following these characters. It's like heightened, super suspenseful, basically a silent film, but not silent. I guess I don't really like when people call it a silent film.
It kind of is.
It is, but the sound is very prominent.
Not the sound, but the speaking.
Without dialogue. Yeah. But and again, that's another thing I love about this movie, the sound, right? It's very, there's times where you can't really tell apart the music from the sound effects and the editing, and how you get different points of like reference. If you saw it in theaters, again, it's another one I saw on 70 millimeter. 70 millimeter IMAX, where the sound is just placed in weird positions where you're hearing your plane flying away from back here, and it's starting to rush more and more towards you, and you see like the look on these like soldiers' face. It's just a brilliant. This is one of my favorite war movies of all time.
That's crazy.
Because it just goes because it really does put you in a driver. It's, to me, what I love about this movie, it's the first 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, but an entire movie.
That's kind of true.
And
Except less bloody, obviously.
Yeah, less bloody. Yeah, of course. But the same amount of visceralism, the same amount of fear, the same amount of suspense. It's just, man.
When that plane crashes into the water and that guy is gonna drown, that pilot, I'm freaking out, dude. I'm literally like, you better.
He's trying.
Oh, bro, I'm like, you better not drown like this, bro.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be so pissed. Like I was dying in that scene because drowning is awful.
Yeah.
Like that's gotta be so terrible. That's gotta be one of the worst ways to go, which is why I felt every emotion in that scene.
Right.
Also, funny enough, Tom Hardy is great in this movie.
Oh yeah.
And he plays the hero in this movie, which is kind of rare for Tom. Not rare, but he's usually
a morally corrupted / villain.
He usually plays like a villain type role, or at least an anti-hero type role. But he's very much a super. Tom Hardy's the kind of actor that disappears into every role, and even though this role doesn't necessarily have a lot of character development, you buy him as just a super British pilot. Like you're just a super British dude, who really wants to help your people, and and you're your last defense. Yeah, air support is all the British people had, and you had one plane, and that was Mr. Tom Hardy, and you could feel that throughout the entire movie. You felt that. And it's so funny because I don't know if you've watched like the clips on YouTube where it says like Tom Hardy low key sounded like Bane in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, you've got the plane, now turn it around. I am running out of gas on this plane. And he's just talking like Bane, and you're like, oh shit, it's Bane on a plane. And he's like quoting the Dark Knight Rises. Perhaps he's wondering why you would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane. As he's driving the plane.
Yeah.
But anyways, it really is like, it's well done in that sense, and you feel the desperation and you feel the reward too, right?
Yeah.
I think Christopher Nolan really wanted that optimistic ending. That very positive, like, yay, go Britain, go UK, all the way, England till I die, kind of.
England is my city.
Yeah, that kind of thing. As far as like, this is like such a big moment in history, kind of like Darkest Hour, which is a great movie, by the way.
Okay. All right.
But for my thing is like, it really is that historical perspective and putting you inside the history of what happened, which is something that Saving Private Ryan did. I think this movie did as well for that Dunkirk moment in history.
Right.
It puts you inside a moment in history where there was no cameras, there was no nothing, there was just first-hand perspective, and Christopher Nolan takes you back in time into how desperate that moment must feel like.
Right. No, this is far and away. Again, we touched on desperately, but I also think the whole idea of hope and optimism, how these characters are kind of anchoring their own kind of hope and trying to achieve something. And you even see it in like the Mark Rylance character too, right? Particularly like he had a son who like died in the war, but he's still like looking to fight and do right by his country by taking his little boat out there and ultimately facing even more dire consequences with Cillian Murphy's character, who's deranged and shell shocked by like everything that's happening, and so particularly by going back to the boat or whatever, back to the beach, you know. And he even kills that kid like accidentally. Like it's
a weird combination of like you feel bad for Cillian Murphy's character, and then you don't like him and you hate him, and then you like feel bad, but then you hate him, and it's a weird vibe you get because you do feel so many mixes of emotions because you're like, well, he's desperate, he's in shock, but at the same time it's like chill, dude, and at the same time it's like he's trying to help you, and it's so many mixes of emotions during that scene for sure. But yeah, you're right. Overall, it's about the mission of Dunkirk, which initially was civilian people, like civilian boats of England going out to rescue these people. That was Churchill's last hurrah. That was his idea. He's like, I don't know what else can you do? I don't know. Send civilians with their boats out? Okay, let's do it. Like he literally had no other ideas left, and he was like, I guess we can send civilians out with their boats. Right. You imagine that? Like that's how desperate they were, to the point that it's like, imagine that scenario nowadays, which like, hey, RB3, go take your car and drive to, I don't know, somewhere over here, and you got to save people. It's like, me? Yo, shit, bro. But that's how, like, crazy that moment was, and it's kind of like a moment in history for England as far as resilience, because it's all about resilience in this movie.
Right.
So absolutely.
No,
Any last words on Dunkirk?
Well, I mean, you know, we've gone into it. I've ranted about it extensively multiple times on the show.
It's your favorite movie.
Still my
of 2017.
favorite movie of 2017.
Yeah.
And I definitely think, like I said, one of my favorite Nolan movies. You know, and I also think, you know, this movie doesn't get enough credit for his acting too. I mean, you know, the main kid, I don't know who plays who's the main kid in this movie. He's really good. And Henry Styles, surprisingly enough, I didn't even know he was like a pop singer before.
You did.
I knew he was something.
On.
Come on, man. Do I look like 10 dudes listening to like in One Direction? Like, no, I'm not. So,
that kid's name.
I'm not sure. But he was good. I thought all the acting in this movie was like actually kind of superb for what they were given. And yeah, all over, man. This is again my favorite movie of 2017, and I definitely think that hopefully Nolan, you know, I like the direction that Nolan took, because apparently, you know, again, a lot of people were disappointed by Dark Knight Rises, a lot of people were disappointed by Interstellar, but he went a totally different direction with Dunkirk, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, this is definitely a different movie for him. Once again, it's Nolan trying something different and pushing himself in a different direction, and that's a testament to his genius. Any last words on Nolan? For me, it would just be like this guy, once again, he tries to define cinema in a different light every time he makes a movie, and that's just enough to prove that he's one of the greatest directors working right now, as well as someone who wants to preserve cinema as a whole.
Preserve the traditions of cinema.
Preserve the traditions of cinema. So props to Mr. Christopher Nolan. Nolanite for life.
Yeah, absolutely.
You?
Yeah, same. Yeah.
All right, guys, that was the Meaning of Podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We talked about Christopher Nolan at length.
Yes.
We talked about the greatness of Interstellar and the power of love and Anne Hathaway. And what's the movie she's in? Princess Diaries.
Princess Diaries.
We talked about the potential of a Christopher Nolan musical. Let us know what kind of musical you would like to see from Christopher Nolan.
What's your top three?
Oh, my top three. Can I put the Dark Knight Trilogy all into one movie or no?
Sure, I guess, yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, okay.
If I put that, then I would put that as my number one, as far as like, because I love Batman Begins, I love Dark Knight, and I like Dark Knight Rises a lot. Actually, I love Dark Knight Rises. So I'll put that as my number one. Inception is my number two. And what would be my number three? Real quick. My number three would be...
Prestige.
No, it would be Dark Knight Trilogy, Inception, and then, man.
Memento?
No, I think it would be Prestige. Either Prestige or Interstellar. One of those.
Whoa, Interstellar.
All
right. Take the Dark Knight Trilogy out of it.
If I take the Dark Knight Trilogy out of it, like I don't include it, or
or just
three individual movies.
3 individual movies.
Dark Knight, Inception, Batman Begins.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. Dark Knight, Inception, Batman Begins. Yeah.
Batman Begins is probably my number 4, so I respect that choice.
And what's your 3?
Definitely number 1, Dark Knight. Number 2, Dunkirk. Number 3, Inception.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So I go
That's
for
fair.
that.
All right, guys, let us know what is your top 3 Nolan films. Let us know what you guys liked about the podcast. Hopefully you guys listen all the way through. If you did, you will get a special prize in your inbox. That's actually not true.
Yeah.
But still, make sure you leave us a comment, and we'll probably like it, and we'll probably mention it on next week's episode. Right. Thank you very much for listening to the Meaning of Our Podcast. I'm Ace.
This is RB3.
And we are peacing out, guys. Peace out.